Hi, I'm Claudia Hosky from Fed Insider, and on behalf of the George Washington University College of Professional Studies, Carasoft, and Lookout, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's webinar on mobile security, a requirement for national security. Please type your questions and comments into the Q&A pod. If we don't get to them during today's webinar, we'll share them with our speakers so they can follow up with you. Also, take note of the Resources tab on the left side of your screen to download today's slides. We offer live captioning for all of our webinars. To follow along with us today, use the hyperlink under the Live Captioning or CART tab located above the slides. We'll have the full transcript available in the next day or two. And to earn training credit for today's webinar, you'll have to answer all polling questions and stay online for the duration of the conversation. And now, let me turn over the reins to today's moderator, John Breeden from Fed Insider. Take it away, John.
Great. Thank you so much, Claudia. Hello, my friends. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm John Breeden, and today I'm going to be moderating what I know is going to be a lively and really interesting discussion about a critical topic, and that is mobile security in government. As you all know, mobile devices are pretty ubiquitous these days. Like many of you, my smartphone is never very far away from me, and the same is true for government employees and just about everyone else. Plus, many agencies have embraced Bring Your Own Device programs, or BYOD, although in some cases, the fact that those devices and applications running on them are so targeted by attackers that BYOD is sometimes jokingly referred to as Bring Your Own Danger. The pandemic, of course, also accelerated the use of mobile computing as well, with more remote work and more devices being used and more reliance on things like cloud storage and other similar technologies. But although the threat landscape is, of course, growing, it's not all gloom and doom. Government agencies can keep their mobile workforces protected with a combination of best practices, new security standards, and, of course, vigilance. We're going to talk about all of that on the show today with two extremely talented and very experienced guests who work in this field every single day. I'm super excited to get the show started, so let's meet our speakers and then we can begin. First off, let me welcome Michael McHugh, the Mobile Security Programs Manager with the Cyber Services staff in the Office of the Chief Information Officer with the Department of Justice. Michael, it's a real honor to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thank you, John. Good to be here.
Excellent. We also have a really well-known expert on mobile security joining us today. David Richardson is the Vice President of Product, Endpoint, and Security for Lookout. David, I know how busy you are, so thank you so much for taking the time to join us and talk with our audience today. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, John. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Well, thank you both again for being here. We have a lot of interesting items on the agenda to talk about today. This is a fascinating, really unique topic. I'm really excited. But both of our guests today have some really interesting backgrounds that really make them two of the top experts in this field, and no joke about that. So let's take a moment to learn a little bit about the folks that we're going to be spending the next hour with. So, Michael, let's start with you. Now, you have a really long title. You're the Mobile Security Programs Manager with the Cyber Services staff in the Office of the Chief Information Officer with the Department of Justice. That must be an incredibly powerful responsibility. Can you tell us a little bit about your background in technology and also government service and how all that led you to your career today with the Department of Justice?
Absolutely, sir. And yeah, I was told a while ago when I started my government career that in government, at least, the longer your title is, the less important you are. So take that with a grain of salt. But yeah, I got started in the military, so I'm a Marine Corps veteran. It got my feet wet with technology and protecting the mission on the DoD front. And when I was transitioning out, I was looking at where's the best place to go, where can I be most effective. I was getting older, so I wasn't so much an asset in the front lines, so to speak. But I definitely saw back in the early 2000s, mid 2000s, that the cyber warfare was really emerging as a threat to our government assets, our country's assets. And I took a lot of interest in it. I actually got my cyber career started at the Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, in Quantico, Virginia. So working again closely with the Marines over there. I got embedded into a group that did mobile security testing for mobile vulnerabilities and forensic assessments. I actually learned a lot from that group. I still have a couple books on my bookshelf behind me that were passed down to me from that group. I learned enough from them and that to convince DOJ to hire me, and I've been here ever since.
Excellent. Wow, what a great story. And thank you for your service, Michael. I really appreciate that. Definitely. I have a lot of amazing questions for you. So, David, over to you. Now, Lookout Security is probably the biggest name in mobile security, and you are also one of the foremost experts in this field. So, we're really fortunate to have you join us today. Now, today you are the Vice President of Product, Endpoint, and Security for Lookout. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and also some of the things that you're most proud of to be able to work on with your many public sector customers?
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Again, it's a pleasure to be here. I got started in computer science, hands-on programming, engineering, and then from there, I would say I started as a mobile expert and not a cybersecurity expert. And 15 years ago, I had an opportunity to join this small fledgling company called Lookout, and I've been there ever since. And I would say, as soon as I became cybersecurity adjacent, I got sucked in like a black hole. Suddenly it was the most interesting stuff that we were working on was everything that was directly related to the security side of things. Because I was working on the usability of the product and how to make it, how to like optimize funnels and these kinds of things from more of a traditional mobile and like product management perspective, but then really got sucked into the cybersecurity side of things. And, I've absolutely loved it. It's been great 15-year journey here with Lookout, with a variety of different roles, hands-on engineer, engineering manager, product manager, and then, eventually I was running a product org, and these days, mostly focused on the threat intelligence and security side of things. I would say the thing that excites me the most is when we get to really protect one of our customers against a new emerging threat. And especially if we manage to do things like actually get attribution for the bad guys, get them dismantled, et cetera. Those are the things that are the most exciting for me. Enabling our customers, especially our customers in the public sector, to be able to achieve their missions, which are so critical. And, mobile, like we'll talk about it a lot, in the discussion here today, but it's a double-edged sword, right? It's a huge productivity improvement. The fact that we've got these devices in our pockets, but, and they can help us achieve missions and do things that we couldn't otherwise do. But of course, there's also, there's a danger associated with that data and that access and the sensors and that following us around everywhere that we go.
Excellent. No, really sounds like some exciting stuff. Thank you, David. Really appreciate it. Thank you both for sharing your amazing backgrounds. I'm sure our audience appreciates having such experienced guests to talk about the topic of mobile security. Now, as I mentioned during the introduction, mobile computing is literally everywhere, and the threats against it are just as prevalent. So we have a lot to talk about. I think the best approach might be to kind of level set the situation first for our audience regarding mobile computing within government, and then we'll move into some of the key challenges and then wrap things up with potential solutions and advice from our two experts today. So, Michael, I'd like to begin with you by kind of letting folks know, if you would, for your take on how important mobile computing is in government. And then I have a few questions about the DOJ specifically. Now, as a little bit of background, when we started doing these mobile security shows a number of years ago, people were like, well, if there's so many threats to mobile, just remove mobile computing devices from government service. It's kind of the same thing we heard when wireless was starting out. That probably seems kind of funny now, but that's what folks were thinking. So, Michael, what's your impression about the importance of mobile computing in government these days?
Yeah, great question, John. And yeah, I did chuckle a little bit. Security's first answer to something new is always no, get rid of it, don't allow it. That's the best way to secure. And it's funny, it's funny to think about taking that approach today. Um, I know your question was around government, but when you think about, mobile phones, it's a consumer technology designed to, be addictive. Everybody loves their smartphone. They're built for you to love them. They're built for you to use them. It's in these manufacturers' best interest to create a piece of hardware that you want to have in your pocket, you want to be using 24/7, and it works. I'm guilty. I'm sure the audience is guilty. I'm sure the panel is guilty. They are, a purpose-built device for consuming information and collecting it at the same time, unfortunately. And so, once that box has been opened, you think about removing it now, and it's just an absolute no. The efficiencies that we've gleaned from having a mobile workforce are unmeasurable. So, yeah, I think the importance of it, I won't be the one to define that, but I'd say it's extremely important to the mobile workforce, extremely important to government, extremely important to adding efficiencies at every step. And we're here now. That box has been open, so it's just we got to figure out the best way to secure it and enable the workforce.
Yeah, of course. No, that's great. And also, Michael, I wanted to ask you this: did the reliance on mobile computing in government increase even more with the pandemic and the massive shift to remote working environments that a lot of agencies went through?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'd say post pandemic, mobile was still a part of the day to day, but once we shifted to a fully remote workforce, that definitely necessitated the employment of mobile. More and more office apps started getting utilized. So I know we're on Zoom today, but Teams is the flavor of virtual chat that the Department of Justice uses. We have that on our mobile phones. We have Outlook. Everything is kind of seamless between desktop and mobile. So again, once that feature is offered to the end users, once that box is open, it's no turning back.
Absolutely. And David, over to you. I know you, in your position there at Lookout, you kind of get to see an overview across government and also the private sector in terms of mobile use. We know that mobile computing has really exploded in recent years, as Michael was saying, but how has that also made inroads into professional and also government circles? What kinds of work-related activities now kind of fully rely on mobile computing these days?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely see, I think all the trends in the government are just probably more accelerated in the private sector in terms of rapid adoption of cloud services like Office 365. And then Office 365 ends up becoming sort of the enabler for, okay, like now anyone from their mobile device can access all of the data that they would, have traditionally needed to maybe get on their VPN to get to their SharePoint server, to get to their SMB share or something like that, right? It's now all available. It's at our fingertips from the cloud, at any point in time. And, we're now actually starting to see, in certain fields like manufacturing and retail, where mobile devices, whether they're smartphones or tablets, they're like the primary device that employees are interacting with. Home healthcare is another big growing field right now. We have an aging population here in the U.S. And there's a big focus on in-home healthcare. These are iPads or tablets being sent home with nurses, and they're tracking everything about what medication and all sorts of things like that. They're connecting to the network within the home. So there's a lot of jobs where you're no longer even issued a laptop or a desktop. You only be given a mobile device to do everything. I mean, I'm sure we've all had an experience where, like a contractor comes to your home and there's no clipboard anymore. They're completely, there's an iPad and they're sending you a quote and they're, completing everything, all of those activities that way. And I think the thing that really seals it the most for me is the fact that you've now got these purpose-built apps. That it's what used to be a web app or a website or a paper process or something like that. It's actually a purpose-built app that you're going to use, to complete your work activities. It's no longer just the traditional like calendar contacts kind of syncing to devices that we might have all talked about with our Blackberries back in the day, right? It's now we're talking purpose-built apps that you use as a primary interaction for many workers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I do miss my clipboard. I used to always carry one when I was working back in the lab. That was pretty cool. But oh well, things come and go. So, Michael, what David was saying really does ring true for a lot of people. I wonder though if, since you work with the Department of Justice, I wonder if you could maybe provide us with an example of a Department of Justice agency or something where mobility has really become a real cornerstone in helping them to complete their mission, and how that mobility is used. Oh, Michael, are you on mute?
Let me unmute here. Yeah, sorry.
I was like, he's really thinking about it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with all of David's points. In fact, I'm going to steal that next time I get the question of mobile importances. Yeah, you can't even have a landscaper come to your house and perform a job without interacting with mobile. As it relates to government and DOJ specifically, everybody knows the popular agencies like FBI and U.S. Marshals and ATF and all their missions, and you can kind of deduce how important mobile would be to those field agents and those tactical environments. But one group that I've worked with more recently, I've had some projects come up with is the Bureau of Prisons. And even in my tenure at Justice, I didn't realize how many missions the BOP does. They're the only federal agency that owns hospitals and owns clinics and education centers in addition to their prison facilities. And one of their missions is to reintegrate incarcerated folks and get them the training they needed to be contributing members of society. And whether it's an inmate going to a doctor's visit or going to a learning facility or joining a conference like this to learn about mobile security, mobile impacts them. And it's my job and also BOP's job to secure that experience and make it beneficial. So when that inmate does return to the community, he's not he doesn't have anything working against him. He's up to speed on the latest technology and all of that good stuff. So I think that's a really interesting use case that I myself just learned.
Yeah, no, that was really great. Thank you, Michael. That was a great example, and one that you're right, people probably didn't think about. Now, later on in the show, we're going to be talking about some of the threats to mobile. But I wanted to ask you and I'm going to get into this with you a little bit, Michael, but just so everybody knows how the Department of Justice works, you all use managed mobile devices that the government completely owns and maintains. But I wanted to ask you if make sure that was true. And then also, what is your stance right now on BYOD or bring your own device programs?
Yeah, so you've got it correct, sir. We are a fully managed environment. I think the industry term is COBO, corporate owned business only. And so that's kind of the posture that we've set up across the department. There is always discussion about YO. There's definitely efficiencies to be gained from that. But I mean, I was talking with a group earlier on this topic, and I know DoD is doing a lot of innovative stuff to bring BYO to their soldiers. But as far as like the containerization approach from the different manufacturers, even third parties, we just haven't seen industry catch up with really hardening the environment and really separating out and sandboxing that data. Once you break into iOS or an iPhone, they do a very good job of their walled garden approach and keeping intruders out. But once you're in and you can move laterally, and it can get pretty scary. So that and other reasons, but mostly security, we kind of shy away from BYO at this time for the department.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for clarifying that. And that'll dovetail into our discussion in just a bit. Thank you both for level setting the situation for our audience today. I'm sure they appreciate it. I'm pretty sure everybody's now kind of on the same page. And speaking of our audience, before we move on, I would like to invite all of you in the audience today to please submit any questions you might have for our amazing guests today. I mean, both of our guests are really the top of our fields when it comes to mobile devices and security. We're going to try to get to some of your questions live on the show today, but there's not enough time. We're also going to round them up and send them to our speakers after the show. So in either case, don't miss out on your chance to get to your mobility security questions in front of our great panel today. Some of you are already doing that. I saw some of you were submitting before the show even started, which is great. So we're going to try to get to as many of those as we can. And thank you. Please keep those questions coming in. We, as always, love to hear from you. Okay, so now that everyone is kind of on the same page about the topic today, let's dive a little bit deeper into it and talk about some of the challenges regarding better mobile security, and then we'll get into some of the solutions as well. So, David, let's talk about the major threats to mobile computing, something that you and Lookout have been combating for many years now. When we look at the current threat landscape, I know it's a pretty bleak picture overall. We do lots of shows on cybersecurity. But how much of a target is mobile computing specifically? Is that something that attackers are actively trying to exploit these days?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would say largely attackers are putting their attention to, where they're going to be successful, right? And there's a couple reasons why you would target mobile, but I would say the primary reason is because targeting a mobile device is essentially compromising an individual. Right? It's the closest thing that you can to having hacked that person. Maybe Neuralink sometime down the line will have, you'll actually be able to hack people. But, these days that device is kind of the closest that you can come. And here's what I mean about that. Like, you're talking about a device that is with you 24/7. It's got a microphone that can hear everything you hear. It's got a camera that can see everything you see. It's got GPS that follows you everywhere you go, right? And it's not just that, it's also your digital identity. It's essentially your key, whether it's through passwords, through multi-factor authentication, through an authenticator app or an SMS-based one-time password that gets sent to you. They're all relying on your mobile device. Even more modern technology like passkeys, things like that. They're leveraging your mobile device. They're leveraging biometrics from your mobile device. Those kinds of things. So if you could only compromise one device, you would compromise someone's mobile device. Right? It's way more impactful than compromising their laptop or something like that. If you're able to see everything that's going on that device. Then what I'll say, I'm gonna bring up this concept of what we're calling the modern kill chain. And basically, the modern kill chain is not too different from the traditional Lockheed Martin kill chain, but there's a couple of things that are kind of interesting and nuanced about it. The first is how quickly modern attackers are compromising organizations. So they're very rapidly, like in the traditional kill chain, it's like sort of get in, stay undetected, look around, harvest as much data as you can for as long as possible. These days, a lot of this is like smash and grab. It's do recon on your target, and recon in the traditional sense, like we might think of like, I'm going to run Nmap and I'm going to discover their open ports. And I'm going to figure out what IIS version they're using on their servers. And I'm going to look for unpatched vulnerabilities and run an exploit to get in the door, right? But these days, recon is increasingly like, I'm going to look on LinkedIn and I'm going to look on Facebook and I'm going to look on sales tools like Zoom Info and things like that to try to harvest as much information as I can about an individual. And then I'm going to attempt to social engineer them to get their credentials. Through, SMS phishing, or like voice phishing, even email phishing. Where do you click on links in your email these days? Primarily, it's on your mobile device, right? So all of those kinds of social engineering techniques, which are really just about getting credentials from a device, they're increasingly targeting mobile devices. And, I like to say these days, like hackers don't really hack in, they just log in. They're just getting legitimate credentials. They're using those credentials to access an organization, and then they're using the access that individual has to get other data, to get data out of the organization, or to compromise other individuals. So after they get in the door, they're doing things like searching across OneDrive or Microsoft Teams or Slack for usernames and passwords. And they're going through your chat history, and they're reaching out. They might have a specific target in mind. Like, unfortunately, post Okta breach, their, Okta admins is now almost like a public information these days, right? So they might have a specific target in mind. So they target anyone at your organization, get in the door, and then reach out through that person's account, through Slack or Teams or something like that, to a specific target and say, hey, I know we haven't chatted in a while, but I have an urgent question for you. Can you hop on a quick meeting with me? And then now the phishing link is coming from inside the house. It's a trusted source coming internally. Ask them to log in via their SSO, steal their credentials, and then use those credentials to further compromise the organization. So this whole like modern kill chain, this can happen in a matter of 15 minutes from when the first SMS messages start going out to when data is already leaving the building, because dozens of accounts were compromised and they're immediately starting to steal and exfiltrate data.
Yeah, wow. Thank you so much, David. That's really eye-opening. As you were talking, I was just thinking about all the information that's on my phone and what would happen if it got compromised. So that is kind of scary. Thank you for bringing that up. Michael, I actually have an audience question that I'd like to give you, and I thought it was a really good one. And it involves, I know that the Department of Justice is actually, I believe, one of the most attacked federal agencies. And the audience question asks, what is the single biggest security threat to users that you're seeing? So in terms of those attacks made against mobile computing devices, what kinds of threats do you think are the most prevalent these days, or potentially maybe the most dangerous?
Yeah, good question. And actually, I'd have to agree with David in answering it. So, he's not wrong. The mobile attack surface is definitely the sought after attack surface. I think the dark web published like the payout for different exploits, and an enterprise server to server email server, which used to be the creme de la creme for popping, will pay you out $250,000 or $500,000 for an exploit to that. But if you can pop a mobile phone, you will be getting paid over $1 million just for one working exploit, which is, crazy. So that puts every, advanced persistent threat team on alert, like, hey, that is what we want to develop. That is what we want to go after. So we're definitely tracking all of those. We definitely see, spyware and surveillanceware as the prevalent, advanced threat out there. And for good reason. As David mentioned, all the sensors on these phones, on the modern smartphone, there's more sensors and measuring devices than, most NASA satellites have that are still orbiting in our solar system. So that's, crazy to think about. And yeah, you're right. DOJ is, definitely a sought after target. And David, to his point, credential harvesting is right up there with, a daily attack. I don't want to call it the lazy way of hacking, but I think David put it best is like, yeah, they just want to get our credentials and log in as us, and then they're inside. And once you're inside, even in a zero trust environment, which is ideal, you're still able to do some damage. 15 minutes goes by like that. And if you get the right provisions and the right access, and your targets, and you have a little bit of information and can piece it together, you can have a Okta situation on your hands pretty quick.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting, Michael. Thank you so much. So, David, I have to assume that one of the reasons why, Michael's talking about credential harvesting, and it sounds like he gave a great reason as to why that's happening. But another reason I think that maybe they're happening is because, they work. Are there, in terms of mobile security, are there security blind spots that can be created by a mobile computing environment that organizations need to look out for, that maybe are blind spots because they're mobile computing and not necessarily part of the normal server and desktop type of network?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I do think mobile is a blind spot for many organizations, and I think there's a number of reasons why. So we work with a lot of customers who have been targeted by modern threat actors like Scattered Spider, who are engaging in this sort of like modern kill chain style attack that I was describing. And one of the things that we've heard time and time again is, they might know they're under attack, like, okay, because some users reported that they're getting these SMS messages all at once. And then they even might know, okay, there's these 18 really great phishing domains that have been put up that are impersonating our single sign-on server that are being actively sent out to individuals at the moment. And then they go and they add that to their firewall rules and they block that. And then they notice that there's no traffic flowing to any of those domains. And the reason why is because these are people clicking on these links on their mobile devices that are perhaps not in the office. A lot of these attacks are occurring after hours. Maybe they're working from home. And none of that data is actually going through any sort of corporate firewall. And so, they realize like, oh, I thought I had these controls in place, but actually when it comes to mobile, you may or you may not. And so, the number one thing that I would say is organizations need to think about in their red team exercises, these kinds of threats. What happens if it's an SMS based phishing attack against your organization, hyper targeted against your organization? Like, will you have the ability to see who is compromised, to stop the attack even once you know that it's occurring? Will you have the right control points in place? And if I can actually just share an example of a specific attack as well. There's one that we found recently, a new phishing kit that we're calling Crypto Chameleon, that was actually targeting the FCC. And the way that this kit works, it's kind of interesting. So one, they built a perfect replica of the FCC Okta page, and FCC happens to be an Okta customer, and this is one character off from the legitimate FCC Okta domain. And you accompany something like this that it has the same warning messages of you're accessing federal systems and those kinds of things that you're accustomed to seeing. You accompany that with, some SMS-based messages that say, perhaps something that's driving urgency. There was unauthorized access to your account. Click here to approve or deny. And then you go to deny it and, it asks you to log in. So you join it with messages like that. And you walk the user through step by step all of the things that they need. People think, oh, okay, I have multi-factor authentication, like I don't have to worry about phishing. But like, no, it's just one extra step for the phisher, right? They get their username, they get your password, they get your MFA token, and then they get in the door. And the thing that was so interesting to me, there's a number of interesting things about this phishing kit, but the thing that was so interesting to me, from like a high level overview perspective, is that this was a threat actor who was being quite successful stealing cryptocurrency from people. And they were stealing, $50,000+ from individual victims. And they pivoted to start targeting employees of organizations. So first we saw them target Coinbase employees and Binance employees. And then their next target was the FCC. So they were quite profitable from what we could see from the money that they were successfully stealing, quite profitable on the targeting individual consumers, but they still made the leap to start going after organizations and government agencies, knowing that data is going to be extremely valuable to them. They'll find some way to try to ransom that, et cetera, and go after organizations, which is something that we've seen, common pattern from groups like Scattered Spider, engage in the past.
Wow, that's really incredible, David, and thank you so much for sharing that example. That was really interesting and quite scary. Thank you for that. So Michael, now, as we mentioned before, the DOJ has not allowed BYOD programs yet. So you have a little bit of an advantage when it comes to control over your mobile security. But even for organizations that have managed devices, are there any special considerations that really need to be addressed that are different from that traditional network security so that you can avoid some of those really frightening blind spots like David was describing?
Yeah, absolutely. And so, yeah, it's easy to get, to be an alarmist and get a case of paranoia as you dive down this rabbit hole of mobile security threats and what's at risk and, the appetite of these threat actors. And David is 100% right. So you can kind of see why we've taken our approach on the BYOD at this time is, the attack surface is real. But yeah, even, going with our approach with business only approach fully managed, there's still a lot that needs to be done, and really you mentioned like legacy IT equipment, and visibility gaps between mobile and like a Windows machine, and it's so true. So for better or worse, Apple and Google, the two main manufacturers, and Android, they don't allow kernel access, root access, to security tools or management tools. It's just too much of a risk, and rightfully so. If those tools do get popped, then they can laterally move into the phone. But it also limits visibility to the enterprise. So we can't manage these devices like we would a traditional information system. We don't have full range EDR. And for that reason, that visibility is why we really don't see too many headlines about, oh, this is a mobile exploit, when oftentimes the attack starts at mobile. The link was sent to the mobile phone. It was on the cellular network, and that's how that's the point of entry to move laterally into the enterprise and to take down the network. You're definitely not going to see it if you're not looking and you don't have the solutions in place to give you the visibility and give you even the logs or the real-time alerting as to what's going on. David from Lookout is, I think we can say it, DOJ is a customer of Lookout, the mobile threat defense, and mobile threat defense came onto the scene probably 7 or 8 years ago now. And that tool set has matured quite a bit in the last just really 3 years. We leverage fully the extent of David's team and his threat research team, really literal geniuses in the mobile space, protecting these devices and getting information that enterprise needs. And so I would say, and it's even called out in NIST guidance as one of the pillars to managing a mobile security environment is mobile threat defense. And so I would say mobile threat defense is definitely a good tool in your arsenal for securing a fleet of mobile devices.
Yeah, excellent. Well, appreciate your position on that. Let me ask you, I have an audience question for you, Michael. It's kind of along these lines, but instead of looking at kind of the server side, looking at the client side, the people who are actually using these devices. Now, I know you don't use BYOD programs, but maybe you can answer this question anyway, and that is mobile devices. People kind of a lot of times they're very personal to them, and the audience question wanted to know, people tend to shy away from any rules or regulations that get placed on them. How can federal agencies kind of manage expectations when it comes to putting security on mobile devices? And the audience question, for example, brought up the TikTok ban, for instance.
Yeah. So really, really good question around managing expectations and users. And it's so true. I mean, I think when like the desktop came out way back in maybe the 70s, it was slowly adopted, but now it's at every enterprise. The mobile phone came out just early 2000s, and it's in the hands of almost everybody on the face of the earth. And, you can get away with, not using a computer for a month or, even daily, but you can't get away from using a mobile phone. It is so personal. It's on everybody. So when you issue something like a work phone or even a BYO, managing that expectation and that separation of church and state is difficult. So the way justice does it, and again, our devices are a separate standalone device that's fully managed. But we have alerting to the end user in the form of even just our background display, our wallpaper on the phone that says this is a government system. Its use may be monitored. Just putting it up front and clear that this is a government device. It's an iPhone or a Pixel. It may look like your phone, but it's not. So there's that. And we also have the full complement of security policy and rules of behavior and all of that. So we go full government on it. But that's how we kind of manage the end user expectation. And even then, we'll have users, asking questions or sending in tickets and verifying what their understanding is of it. So
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for addressing the audience member's question, and thank you for the audience member for the question. Like Michael said, it was a really good one. So thank you for that. Now, let me ask you, David. Since Michael and the audience member brought up TikTok, we hear a lot of concerns about things like TikTok and other apps. In terms of mobile security, I guess my question is it only the operating system that we really need to look out for, or are these applications also potentially really the vulnerable spot? What are some examples that you can maybe provide in that area?
Yeah. So definitely one of the most important things you can do is keep your mobile device operating system up to date. Like 100%, like that is crucial. With the way these 0 days work these days, like they go from like nation state, like only the nation states know about the 0 days, to like the advanced surveillance where companies know about them, to suddenly everybody knows about them very, very quickly. And to give you an example there, the Pegasus malware that Lookout and Citizen Lab helped discover initially, that's sold by the NSO group. It started by leveraging three different exploits to basically go from send someone an SMS message to remote code execution on their device, compromise their device, etc. And the WebKit exploit in the middle there, that WebKit exploit that was used to pop open iOS devices is the same exploit that's used by like teenagers to jailbreak their Nintendo Switch. Because it's the same browser. So that's how much that went from multi-million-dollar exploit to hack someone's iPhone to like YouTube videos online showing you how to use the same exploit in order to compromise your Nintendo Switch so you can run pirated software on. So that's how quickly these things move. So definitely keep your operating system up to date. If there's one thing you're going to do, that's what you need to do. And once the patch becomes available, people reverse engineer these patches. They determine what the exploit was that was patched in it. And, as a result, that, it becomes sort of, I would say, public domain of sorts, once these patches become available. But, operating systems aren't enough. These days, a lot of these attacks are leveraging app-specific vulnerabilities. So whether that's social media apps like TikTok, and social media is definitely a big target here, but also messaging apps, mobile messaging apps. So, for example, Meta is actually is in a lawsuit right now with the NSO group, the manufacturers of the Pegasus malware, over the fact that it was leveraging WhatsApp vulnerabilities. So if you were running an old version of WhatsApp on your device, you may be actually opening your device up to remote code execution vulnerability as a result, where someone could send you a WhatsApp message, then compromise your device, hide the message that they delivered to you, such that you don't even know that it ever happened. And then this is fully without your phone could be face down on a table in front of you, and they could clean up the whole mess behind them. And it had nothing to do with the fact that your operating system was out of date. It had to do with the fact that you had an app on your device that contained a vulnerability that enabled somebody to, invisibly get remote code running on your device. So you definitely need to think about application vulnerabilities as well, and keeping all of your applications up to date. And then the last thing I want to say on TikTok, there's a lot of noise around TikTok and what it does and what it doesn't do. And, what I'll say is TikTok's just sort of like the tip of the iceberg. Like in our corpus, there are over 9 million mobile applications that are sending data to China. Like this is not a TikTok specific problem. TikTok happens to be an extremely popular application that has a, potentially large outsized impact, but it's one of 9 million in our corpus that's engaging in these kinds of behaviors.
Wow, thank you so much. A lot to think about there. So the threat section, as I assumed would be, was very eye opening. Now I want to get into a little bit of some of the solutions so that our audience can kind of figure out what they can do about all these problems. So, Michael, we're going to talk about some specific ideas and advice regarding protecting mobility programs and devices. But I wanted to first ask you, since you work in this area all the time, are there any good federal or industry guidelines that our audience can look to kind of get a start and good handle on ways that they can start locking down and thinking about mobile security?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually mentioned it in the earlier question, but it's a NIST publication. I think the title is Guidelines for Managing Mobile Security. So spells it out right there. It's 800-124. I think it's on Rev 2 right now, or I know it's on Rev 2 right now. But it kind of outlines, like, I guess what NIST would define as the pillars of mobile security. So enterprise mobility management, mobile app security vetting, mobile device management, and then of course mobile threat defense, which is what David performs. So that's a really good resource. Also, CISA hosts a federal mobile working group that has many missions, but one sub working group is a security working group. I actually chair the DOJ Mobile Security Working Group. It is an internal group, but we do invite industry, and we do invite other agencies when we have big discussions. We had Apple's cybercrime unit in. We're hosting the Pixel team later this month, early next month. And then of course, like joining conversations like this and participating in conversations like this. That's really where you get the best bang for your buck.
Excellent. Thank you so much. David, in the last section, you kind of scared me a little bit talking about ways that people could hack your phone and you wouldn't even know it, So let me ask you, I know on the desktop, we have a lot of different protections where even if something got through defenses like that, there would be like an antivirus or something like that that would prevent malicious code from activating. Do we have anything for that available for mobile phones, and what should people look for in a good mobile defense solution to prevent those vulnerabilities from exploiting you, if possible?
Yeah. So Michael mentioned earlier the importance of mobile threat defense solution, and Michael did a great job of explaining like the differences between the traditional approach, right, where you like actually get to run in the kernel and you get to have all this privileged access. But of course, it also opened up the attack surface of those platforms, and a lot of times that was how devices were getting hacked as well. So mobile threat defense solutions, they work a little different, which is also one of the reasons why they're the purpose-built ones tend to be better than the ones that are trying to just shoehorn some technology that was built for a different platform and try to see what percentage of it happens to be applicable on the mobile platform. But you need to think about I would say 4 main threat vectors. There's the applications that are installed on devices, which, we talk about vulnerabilities and we talk about surveillanceware and those kinds of things. So there's, app malware, app vulnerabilities. There's even just like app behaviors, like sending data to China and things like that, right? That aren't necessarily vulnerabilities, or maybe there's no malicious intent associated with that, but it still can be a risk to your organization for obvious reasons. Then you've got the device itself. So the operating system version, on Android, there's also the Android security patch level. That's something that's extremely important for organizations to be aware of, a separate security patch that's delivered to devices that fixes most of the 0 days on the platform. The way the device is configured, like, does it have a passcode? Is it a good, strong passcode? Those kinds of things. Is it in a developer mode? Does it have USB debugging enabled? All those kinds of things. Then you also need to think about the networks that the device connects to. So, given that these devices are mobile and we're walking around and we're connecting to, airport Wi-Fi, and we're connecting to, coffee shop Wi-Fi and different things like that. There's network related attacks, new vectors that open up there, man in the middle attacks, those kinds of things. And then of course, there's like the web content that we consume. So the fact that we're using these devices, we're clicking on tons of links, we can get sent to phishing sites and things like that. So those are like the four main vectors you need to look for. So from a mobile threat defense solution, you want one that's going to have comprehensive protection, across all of those vectors and across everything from the vulnerabilities across those vectors to outright malicious intent. And then something that gives you visibility and control so that your organization has the tools it needs for, we talked about blind spots earlier. If you receive this kind of attack, can you block those SMS messages from getting delivered? Can you block your users from being able to navigate to those links, those kinds of things, so that you're prepared and ready to be able to respond to, any of these kinds of situations that could come up.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I was asking. That sounds good. And I know we don't want it to be a commercial or anything, but I assume Lookout Threat Defense has those particular features.
Yes, of course. And I would say, if I had to say one thing, and Michael, thank you, you kind of said this earlier as well. If I had to say one thing about Lookout and really like what makes us different, it really is our threat researchers at the end of the day. It's like mobile threat defense is a set of technology, right? And you can build similar technology. Other vendors can build similar technology, but it's really our data set and our researchers at the end of the day of experts that are there to protect devices and make sure that we've got all of the best, most up-to-date coverage in place, across all of those threat vectors.
Excellent. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you. This has been a super amazing discussion. Unfortunately, my own personal smartphone is telling me that we're almost out of time for today, but I think I can sneak in another question to each of our guests before we have to say goodbye. So, Michael, it certainly seems like the Department of Justice has put a lot of thought and effort into their mobile security, which makes sense given how important your missions are for our country. For agencies that are looking to maybe follow up on some of your success, do you have any advice for them as to what they should look out for and really concentrate on as they work to overcome some of the many mobility challenges that we talked about today?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Dave said it best when he advocated for updated operating systems, and to just kind of color that in a little bit more and tie it back to his research team. Not to make this a commercial again, but it doesn't have to be me or Dave saying like, "Hey, this is valuable." Apple and Google are very good about publishing release notes on their security threats, and they identified the researcher group that identified this in the wild and helped to get the fix to the consumer. And very, very often it's lookout security research, lookout security research, lookout security research. Every now and then there will be an anonymous guy that has a mask and has a voice changer on, and you'll never know his identity. But the Lookout security research team is legitimate for sure. That's another team that we invite often to our mobile security working groups to educate the department and socialize what risk is out there. Because again, if you're not looking for it, you're not going to find it. These attacks phone home at 4 a.m. at night when they're plugged into a charger on your nightstand. If the device is put into a Faraday bag, the application realizes it and says, "Hey, they're onto me," and it wipes itself from the device. They're made to be persistent. They're made to be anonymous, and they're made so you don't see them and you don't patch them. And so, if the best thing is update your operating system and get some type of detection capability, blocking capability, so you know what you're up against.
Great. No, perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. This has been really amazing. And David, it looks like you get the last word on the panel today. Now, we covered a lot of ground in a very short period of time. I thought particularly the threat section today was really eye-opening for me. My question for you then is, since you work in this area all the time, can we truly have a mobility program that has the same or better protection as when working a traditional type of network with a traditional network or device? I mean, can mobility be made really safe enough for government use? And what are the ways to obtain that high level of security assurance?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the risks are different. And perhaps in some ways they might seem scarier because of obviously like the level of access and things like that, but they're still addressable. So, like if you keep your operating system and your apps up to date and you deploy a mobile threat defense solution and you implement a great, a great training program, which is also crucial, something we haven't really talked about today, but super important. Yes, you absolutely can keep mobility safe enough for government and private sector use. It is, but it's different, and it requires you to think about these problems a little bit differently than you would on other platforms, and it requires you to, like I mentioned at the beginning, like run red team exercises on these types of scenarios. Of a mobile breach or anything like that, because you may find in that you actually don't have all the controls that you thought that you had in place when you go marching down that path.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. Great way to end the show. I appreciate that. Thank you both for talking with me and our audience today about this really fascinating discussion. I learned so much today. I'm sure our audience did as well. So thank you so much to our superstar speakers today, Michael and David, for joining us to talk about this critically important topic for our amazingly attentive audience. It's clear that this is something that government really needs to consider, and I appreciate you both taking the time to chat with us today about that. And thank you also to our amazing audience. I'm really glad that you all were here with us today. And please check out our schedule for future shows, because we have a lot of really great content coming up for you all very soon, right around the corner. And I hope to see you all there. So with that, let me turn things now over to Fed Insider's Claudia Hosky for some final thoughts for our amazing audience today.
Thanks so much, John. And thanks again to our speakers today and our audience. Thank you for your participation. Training certificates will be emailed after the webinar ends. And remember to log back in the next day or two if you want a copy of our captioning transcript. We have many webinars in the works, so be sure to visit fedinsider.com so you can see what's coming up and register for multiple webinars at the same time. And while you're there, you can check out our podcast, Feds at the Edge. And with that, this is Fed Insider signing off.